This might be one of the wildest Bitcoin news stories ever. Just a few minutes ago, Donald Trump signed the executive order for the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. David Sachs has now confirmed this and also revealed important background information. By the time you see the video, the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve will probably have been around for a few hours already because of the time difference and so on. I'm usually a bit ahead of you guys here in Germany and the DACH region. Let's take a look at the details, and also why today. It's one of the most important events ever. Tonight, the Crypto Summit is happening, and a lot of people are really looking forward to this event. Lutning had mentioned that the executive order might be signed there. Now the executive order would have been signed earlier. Donald Trump will still give a speech here. And a lot of people are expecting that there will be more announcements coming around digital assets, possibly other crypto stories, stablecoins, and much more. Now let's take a look at all the background information, especially here regarding the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. But before we dive into all the details, here's something to enjoy. The moment when Donald Trump signs the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve here.
Today we're signing, this is very historic, an executive order establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve and digital asset stockpile. This is a promise that you made throughout the campaign, and today we're keeping that promise. The reserve will be capitalized with Bitcoin that the federal government already owns, so it won't cost taxpayers a dime. This is like a digital Fort Knox for digital gold. And premature sales of Bitcoin over the past years cost American taxpayers over $17 billion in lost value, because we didn't have a long-term strategy.
Right.
Now we do. So.
And this is something you believe in fully?
100%, yeah.
Okay.
And the whole community believes in it.
Very good. And they made the promise, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The thing is signed. Now, what's really interesting is what Donald Trump says during the signing. He asks David, "Are you sure this is something you believe in?" And then David says, "Absolutely. I believe it 100%. Donald Trump doesn't seem quite sure of himself here. Or he doesn't seem sure about what he's signing here. So it really seems like he has his advisory team here, but he doesn't really know what he's signing. At least that's how it seems to me. But now we're going to take a close look at everything. Check it out. I'm just here eating some melon. Which would you rather take? Here a watermelon or here a coconut? Also, drop that in the comments too. I actually just walked up from the beach and I'm seeing this news from David Sachs from CryptoSat. He says, just a few minutes ago, Donald Trump signed the executive order for the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. And he really made a longer, more detailed tweet here. We're going to go through the whole tweet, the entire announcement here, and see what it's all about. He says here, 2 promises made, promises kept. So Donald Trump is definitely keeping his word. So pay attention, it says here first. The reserve will be capitalized with Bitcoin that is owned by the federal government and would be seized in the course of a criminal or civil asset forfeiture process. This means it won't cost the taxpayer a cent. According to estimates, the US government owns about 200,000 Bitcoin. However, there has never been a complete audit. And it is important to say, okay, you don't necessarily want to buy new Bitcoin now. Instead, you're using the Bitcoin that you already confiscated. And this Bitcoin will be part of the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. That's about 200,000 Bitcoin. The problem is you don't really know how many Bitcoin there are. That means you first have to do an audit. Not too long ago, we talked about this, and I mentioned that almost all Bitcoin could be lost, or a large part of it could be lost, because reports were coming in that the marshals, the US marshals, those responsible for the cash, were the compliance behind the Bitcoin, that they themselves have no idea how many Bitcoin they actually own in the U.S. And that's a big problem here. On the other hand, you have to say that this is a bit of a disappointment because everyone was expecting a big breakthrough here. Like, yeah, we're going to buy 1 million Bitcoin, just like Cynthia Lummis announced and so on. But now we have the transformation of the confiscated coins into a stockpile. That's already the first step. Now it's about maybe taking further steps. Perhaps there will be an announcement later about doing even more to expand this so-called Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. But let's take a look at what else is going on with this, because there's more information here. So here, it's estimated that the USA owns about 200,000 Bitcoin. The executive order mandates a complete. It mandates an accounting of the federal government's digital assets. So that's exactly what I meant, that you have to do an audit here, just like you have to audit it before Knox. Just like that, we also need to audit the Bitcoin that exists in the USA. That's where the next shock could come from. For example, it might come out, oh shit, we don't have 2 million Bitcoin anymore, but maybe we only have 50,000 Bitcoin left, and so on. David Sachs also mentioned in a post earlier that he really regrets that almost 200,000 Bitcoin have been sold over the last 10 years. Now, David Sachs mentioned that about 200,000 Bitcoin have been sold over the last 10 years. So these were Bitcoin that might have been sold 5 or 6 years ago and so on. And there were massive losses incurred. On the positive side, however, David Sachs clearly seems to have understood the value of Bitcoin and is not selling his Bitcoin. And in hindsight, it's always really, really bad when you find yourself in a position where you've sold your Bitcoin. It goes on from here. It says here that the USA will not sell any Bitcoin held in reserve. They are kept as a store of value. And that's what Donald Trump promised. In Nashville already, he said, we will not sell any Bitcoin. And now we see it here, black and white. David Sachs reported that this is part of the executive order, that the USA will not sell any Bitcoin. And that's another bullish sign. Then it goes on to say the reserve is like a digital Fort Knox for cryptocurrencies, which are often referred to as digital gold. And I actually made a video about that yesterday and wrote to a few people, so what are you guys doing with Fort Knox? I had mentioned in the title that Donald Trump wants to set up a Fort Knox for Bitcoin. And now we see that 3 hours later, after I published the video, it's a bit later for you because the video doesn't go online until you're basically awake. But 3 hours after I posted the video, Donald Trump will set up a Fort Knox for Bitcoin. We now see David Sachs here confirming the whole thing and saying quite clearly, hey, Donald Trump will set up a Fort Knox for Bitcoin. We now have the Fort Knox for Bitcoin, and the people who are laughing, they just look stupid now, although you have to say gone. Fort Knox is also just a marketing term, you know. I mean, what does that even mean? Fort Knox just means that all the Bitcoin will be sitting around at Coinbase later on. Or I don't know. I mean, is Fort Knox then a multi-signature wallet? Or I don't know what they really mean by that. You really have to pay attention to where the cash flow is happening. By the way, if you still want a good hardware wallet, I'll drop a link below for a TREZOR hardware wallet. Here you can build your own Fort Knox. You can securely and simply store your Bitcoin to protect it from hackers, theft, and all sorts of other things. And the cool thing is you can have almost the same security setup as the USA here. You don't have to have a worse security setup here. What's great is that the security costs for Bitcoin are so low that anyone can have their own Fort Knox. And with the code Bitcoin Hotel, you can get 10% off a TREZOR hardware wallet. It goes on to say here, due to early sales of Bitcoin, US taxpayers have already lost over $17 billion in value. That's what I meant, that David Sachs said that you sold 200,000 Bitcoin. This is of course an absolute disgrace, just like in Germany, the Bitcoin that is sold here or in Saxony. Now the federal government needs to come up with a strategy to maximize the value of their holdings. And this is a really, really important part here, maybe the most important one. That means the holdings should be maximized. So the next thing that's going to happen is that they want to evaluate how to accumulate more Bitcoin here. Whether you buy it or do some other things, or whether you use your gold as collateral. And from the borrowed gold, somehow buying Bitcoin with the new loans or something like that. We need to figure that out now. But it is important that this clause is included here. Because if this clause were not included here, then the whole thing would really be. I'd say it's been quite a disappointment because then it would have just been about the conversion and what everyone wants to see, which is the US buying Bitcoin. And in the best case scenario, you just want to see that there are either really big hits coming, sell gold, or do something about it. Buying Bitcoin or printing money to buy Bitcoin, or at least using some kind of surplus. But just converting the holdings here is really, really boring for a lot of people. But it clearly states here, now the federal government has to come up with a strategy to maximize the value of their Bitcoin holdings. So yeah, it sounds to me like they want to accumulate more Bitcoin here. But they still need to figure out exactly how that's going to work. Then it says here, the ministers of finance and trade are authorized to develop budget-neutral strategies for acquiring additional Bitcoin, provided that these strategies do not incur any additional costs for the American taxpayer. And that's really, really bullish, what it says here. That means it's confirmed again that new Bitcoin could be accumulated. Should be. Now they just need to develop the right strategies. That means one condition is no new costs for taxpayers. That means two things come to mind. The first thing I've already mentioned. We're selling the gold or not. The US sells its gold and buys Bitcoin with it. You sell other things you don't need and buy Bitcoin with that. That would be the master plan. You go into the Fort Knox, doing the audit and finds out that there are massive gold holdings here. All the gold items, all the gold ounces are priced from before 1971, when our gold was somehow priced at $40. Now we're at just under $3,000. These unrealized gains are now being accounted for. So that means we now have massive gold reserves that are newly available on the market. And we can leverage these gold reserves again and use that for new credit money. We can then use this credit money to buy Bitcoin with leverage. This could be the big master strategy here, and it's clearly stated, hey, we want to accumulate Bitcoin. We just need to figure out the right way to ensure that taxpayers aren't burdened. I mean, one way to do that is to use the money printing press. You just do some kind of conditional investing, you buy your own government bonds and create a sort of, like a PEP program similar to what the ECB or something has done. Just for Bitcoin, though. So the taxpayer isn't burdened there. This essentially puts a burden on savers because they are expropriated through inflation. It goes on to say, furthermore, with the executive order, a US digital asset stockpile is being established, consisting of other digital assets besides Bitcoin that would be seized in criminal or civil proceedings. So Ethereum, Ripple, and all those shitcoiners can celebrate now too. So congratulations to all the shitcoiners watching here or to all the Bitcoin folks. I sometimes get bashed when I say shit here. Let me know in the comments if you're on the shitcoin side or if you're with Bitcoin. Right now, I'm definitely curious about that, but there's probably going to be a distinction made, because you can see that they are clearly separating it between Bitcoin and shitcoins. And I mentioned this in a video the day before yesterday, that there will likely be a distinction made here. And this is exactly as I mentioned in the video, that there's now a distinction being made between Bitcoin and other coins. And then we also need to look at how many shitcoiners there actually are, because it said, in the first tweet from Donald Trump, I think he mentioned Cardano, Ripple, Solana, Ethereum, and Bitcoin. Those were the 5. And now we need to take a look at which coins the US has confiscated. We need to audit that too. I'm not even sure whether it's the USA, Solana, or Ripple, for example, whether they confiscated anything like that. I'm not sure. You can write to me in the comments below, because here only the confiscated coins are converted, and nothing is bought here yet. So I'm not really sure if there's even an altcoin stockpile if those coins haven't been confiscated at all, because doesn't necessarily mean that every possible shitcoin is being confiscated. Beyond the assets obtained through confiscation procedures, the federal government will not acquire any additional assets for the reserve. It is also important that it is not officially stated here now. We're not going to buy Bitcoin right now. Instead, we're evaluating the purchase of Bitcoin. But for now, we won't be buying any new Bitcoin. The purpose of the reserve is to responsibly manage the federal government's digital assets under the supervision of the Treasury Department. Promises made, promises kept. President Trump promised to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve and a stockpile of digital assets. These promises have been kept. This executive order underscores President Trump's commitment to make the USA the crypto capital of the world. I want to thank the president for his leadership and vision in supporting this cutting-edge technology and for his swift implementation. Thank you for supporting the digital asset industry. So, I actually have to disagree a bit here because this is contradictory. On the one hand, there is talk about a Bitcoin crypto capital, but on the other hand, somehow you only have 200,000 Bitcoin in the best case. So, in my opinion, that's way too little. There is definitely more work to be done here. If you really want to be the crypto stronghold and the crypto capital of the world, then in my opinion, you need to seriously accumulate Bitcoin. But we still need to see what else comes out tomorrow and in the near future. Here, Thomas Sparrow also had a very, very interesting tweet. He says here that if Trump doesn't announce anything tomorrow, Bitcoin could drop to 80,000. Now something would be announced. If Trump announces that the USA is fully committing to a Bitcoin reserve, the value could rise by 80,000 within a week. We will have to wait and see whether the value really increases that much. So if there aren't any other additional announcements or anything like that, then I think that the current announcement isn't really that great. Of course, this is positive news, it must be said quite clearly. But it's not the news now that Bitcoin is somehow going to shoot up by $80,000 in a week. That would really be the announcement where you say, hey, we're actively buying Bitcoin, because then the other nation states would know, then China, Russia, and so on would know, they would know, hey, the USA is actively buying Bitcoin here. If we don't start actively buying Bitcoin now, we're going to miss out on the price. We're basically going to miss out on the Bitcoin opportunities, and so on. And that's why the really big signal to send to the market would be, hey, we're not just creating a stockpile of confiscated coins, but we're also starting to buy a lot of Bitcoin ourselves. Eleanor Tourette, who always has really good insights here, says that 2 more announcements could be coming. First of all, there's excitement about what we might see as a possible bank announcement related to the withdrawal of the so-called Operation Shockpoint 2.0. Bank regulations from the Biden era that restrict access to cryptocurrencies would be described. So, it could happen that because of Operation Shockpoint 2.0, there will be further clarity that crypto companies will have even better regulation, and that there might even be some kind of audit or something, that the people who were involved in Operation Shockpoint 2.0 are held accountable, and a kind of tax announcement, but the specifics are unclear. So the tax announcement, that's what I mentioned before, something that could potentially come. Oh crazy, just look at how it looks here at night. Totally green. The tax announcement that could potentially come is that the capital gains tax might be abolished, meaning that after a year, the Bitcoin would be tax-free. That would definitely be a huge deal on top of that. Yeah, feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think this is bullish or bearish? Did you expect more? Are you guys disappointed? For sure, if you want to buy Bitcoin, if you want to set up your own stockpile, I'll drop a link for you down below. 21 Bitcoin, how you can easily, safely, and simply buy Bitcoin. With the code, you can get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin here. See you later. Peace out.